G. Gurdjieff, All and Everything. 10 books in 3 series, of which this is the first series. The Preface. Original written in Russian and Armenian. Translations into other languages have been made under the personal direction of the author by a group of translators chosen by him and specially trained according to their defined individualities, in conformity with the text to be translated and in relation to the philological particularities of each language. First series, 3 books under the title of An Objectively Impartial Criticism of the Life of Man, or Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson. Second series, 3 books under the common title of Meetings with Remarkable Men. Third series, 4 books under the common title of Life is Real Only Then When I Am. All written according to entirely new principles of logical reasoning and strictly directed towards the solution of the following 3 cardinal problems. First series, to destroy mercilessly, without any compromises whatsoever, in the mentation and feelings of the reader, the beliefs and views by centuries rooted in him about everything existing in the world. Second series, to acquaint the reader with the material required for a new creation and to prove the soundness and good quality of it. Third series, to assist the arising, in the mentation and in the feelings of the reader, of a veritable, non-fantastic representation, not of that illusory world which he now perceives, but of the world existing in reality. Friendly advice. Written impromptu by the author on delivering this book, already prepared for publication, to the printer. According to the numerous deductions and conclusions made by me during experimental elucidations concerning the productivity of the perception by contemporary people of new impressions from what is heard and read, and also according to the thought of one of the sayings of popular wisdom I have just remembered, handed down to our days from very ancient times, which declares, any prayer may be heard by the higher powers and a corresponding answer obtained only if it is uttered thrice. Firstly, for the welfare or the peace of the souls of one's parents. Secondly, for the welfare of one's neighbour. And only thirdly, for oneself personally. I find it necessary, on the first page of this book, quite ready for publication, to give the following advice. Read each of my written expositions thrice. Firstly, at least as you have already become mechanized to read all your contemporary books and newspapers. Secondly, as if you were reading aloud to another person. And only thirdly, try and fathom the gist of my writings. Only then will you be able to count upon forming your own impartial judgment proper to yourself alone on my writings, and only then can my hope be actualized that according to your understanding you will obtain the specific benefit for yourself which I anticipate, and which I wish for you with all my being. Chapter 1. The Arousing of Thought. Among other convictions formed in my common presence during my responsible, peculiarly composed life, there is one such also, an indubitable conviction, that always and everywhere on the earth, among people of every degree of development of understanding, and of every form of manifestation of the factors which engender in their individuality all kinds of ideals, there is acquired the tendency, when beginning anything new, unfailingly to pronounce aloud, or if not aloud, at least mentally, that definite utterance, understandable to every even quite illiterate person, which in different epochs has been formulated variously, and in our day is formulated in the following words: In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and in the name of the Holy Ghost. Amen. That is why I now also, setting forth on this venture quite new for me, namely authorship, begin by pronouncing this utterance, and moreover pronounce it not only aloud, but even very distinctly, and with a full, as the ancient Thulusites defined it, wholly manifested intonation. Of course, with that fullness which can arise in my entirety only from data already formed and thoroughly rooted in me for such a manifestation. Data which are in general formed in the nature of man, by the way, during his preparatory age, and later, during his responsible life, engender in him the ability for the manifestation of the nature and vivifyingness of such an intonation. Having thus begun, I can now be quite at ease, and should even, according to the notions of religious morality existing among contemporary people, be beyond all doubt assured that everything further in this new venture of mine will now proceed, as is said, like a pianola. In any case, I have begun just thus, and as to how the rest will go, I can only say meanwhile, as the blind man once expressed it, we shall see. First and foremost, I shall place my own hand, moreover the right one, which, although at the moment it is slightly injured owing to the misfortune which recently befell me, is nevertheless really my own, and has never once failed me in all my life, on my heart, of course also my own. But on the inconstancy or constancy of this part of all my whole, I do not find it necessary here to expatiate, and frankly confess that I myself have personally not the slightest wish to write, but attendant circumstances, quite independent of me, constrain me to do so. And whether these circumstances arose accidentally, or were created intentionally by extraneous forces, I myself do not yet know. I know only that these circumstances bid me write not just anything so-so, as, for instance, something of the kind for reading oneself to sleep, but weighty and bulky tomes. However that may be, I begin. But begin with what? Oh, the devil! Will there indeed be repeated that same exceedingly unpleasant and highly strange sensation which it befell me to experience when about 3 weeks ago I was composing in my thoughts the scheme and sequence of the ideas destined by me for publication, and did not know then how to begin either? This sensation then experienced, I might now formulate in words only thus: the fear of drowning in the overflow of my own thoughts. To stop this undesirable sensation, I might then still have had recourse to the aid of that maleficent property existing also in me, as in contemporary man, which has become inherent in all of us, and which enables us, without experience any remorse of conscience whatever, to put off anything we wish to do till tomorrow. I could then have done this very easily, because before beginning the actual writing, it was assumed that there was still lots of time, but this can now no longer be done, and I must, without fail, as is said, even though I burst, begin. But with what indeed begin? Hurrah! Eureka! Almost all the books I have happened to read in my life have begun with a preface. So, in this case, I also must begin with something of the kind. I say of the kind, because in general, in the process of my life, from the moment I began to distinguish a boy from a girl, I have always done everything, absolutely everything, not as it is done by other, like myself, biped destroyers of nature's good. Therefore, in writing now, I ought, and perhaps am even on principle already obliged, to begin not as any other writer would. In any case, instead of the conventional preface, I shall begin quite simply with a warning. Beginning with a warning will be very judicious of me, if only because it will not contradict any of my principles, either organic, psychic, or even willful, and will at the same time be quite honest. Of course, honest in the objective sense, because both I myself and all others who know me well expect with indubitable certainty that owing to my writings they will entirely disappear in the majority of readers immediately and not gradually, as must sooner or later with time occur to all people, all the wealth they have, which was either handed down to them by inheritance or obtained by their own labour, in the form of quieting notions, evoking only naive dreams, and also beautiful representations of their lives at present, as well as of their prospects in the future. Professional writers usually begin such introductions with an address to the reader, full of all kinds of bombastically magniloquent and, so to say, honeyed and inflated phrases. Just in this alone, I shall follow their example, and also begin with such an address, but I shall try not to make it very sugary, as they usually do, owing particularly to their evil wiseacring, by which they titillate the sensibilities of the more or less normal reader. Thus, my dear, highly honoured, strong-willed, and of course very patient sirs, and my much esteemed, charming, and impartial ladies, forgive me, I have omitted the most important, and my in no wise hysterical ladies. I have the honour to inform you that although owing to circumstances that have arisen at one of the last stages of the process of my life, I am now about to write books, yet during the whole of my life I have never written not only not books or various what are called instructive articles, but also not even a letter in which it has been unfailingly necessary to observe what is called grammaticality, and in consequence, although I am now about to become a professional writer, yet having had no practice at all, either in respect of all the established professional rules and procedures, or in respect of what is called the bon ton literary language, I am constrained to write not at all as ordinary patented writers do, to the form of whose writing you have in all probability become as much accustomed as to your own smell. In my opinion, the trouble with you, in the present instance, is perhaps chiefly due to the fact that while still in childhood there was implanted in you, and has now become ideally well harmonized with your general psyche, an excellently working automatism for perceiving all kinds of new impressions, thanks to which blessing you have now, during your responsible life, no need of making any individual effort whatsoever. Speaking frankly, I inwardly, personally discern the centre of my confession not in my lack of knowledge of all the rules and procedures of writers, but in my non-possession of what I have called the bon ton literary language, infallibly required in contemporary life not only from writers, but also from every ordinary mortal. As regards the former, that is to say, my lack of knowledge of the different rules and procedures of writers, I am not greatly disturbed. And I am not greatly disturbed on this account, because such ignorance has already now become in the life of people also in the order of things. Such a blessing arose and now flourishes everywhere on earth, thanks to that extraordinary new disease of which for the last 20 to 30 years, for some reason or other, especially the majority of those persons from among all the three sexes fall ill, who sleep with half-open eyes, and whose faces are in every respect fertile soil for the growth of every kind of pimple. This strange disease is manifested by this, that if the invalid is somewhat literate, and his rent is paid for 3 months in advance, he, she or it, unfailingly begins to write either some instructive article or a whole book. Well, knowing about this new human disease and its epidemical spread on earth, I, as you should understand, have the right to assume that you have acquired, as the learned medicos would say, immunity to it, and that you will therefore not be palpably indignant at my ignorance of the rules and procedures of writers. This understanding of mine bids me inwardly to make the centre of gravity of my warning my ignorance of the literary language. In self-justification, and also perhaps to diminish the degree of the censure in your waking consciousness of my ignorance of this language, indispensable for contemporary life, I consider it necessary to say, with a humble heart and cheeks flushed with shame, that although I too was taught this language in my childhood, and even though certain of my elders, who prepared me for responsible life, constantly forced me, without sparing or economizing any intimidatory means, to learn by rote the host of various nuances which in their totality compose this contemporary delight, yet, unfortunately, of course, for you, of all that I then learned by rote, nothing stuck, and nothing whatsoever has survived for my present activities as a writer. And nothing stuck, as it was quite recently made clear to me, not through any fault of mine, nor through the fault of my former respected and non-respected teachers, but this human labour was spent in vain, owing to one unexpected and quite exceptional event, which occurred at the moment of my appearance on God's earth, and which was, as a certain occultist well known in Europe explained to me after a very minute what is called psychophysico-astrological investigation, that at that moment, through the hole made in the window pane by our crazy lame goat, there poured the vibrations of sound which arose in the neighbour's house from an Edison phonograph, and the midwife had in her mouth a lozenge saturated with cocaine of German make, and moreover not ersatz, and was sucking this lozenge to these sounds without the proper enjoyment.